48. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Espinal,
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Peterson is absent. Councilwoman Harris,
Present.
Councilman Vargas is absent. Councilor Royas.
Present.
You have 3 present and 2 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda, please.
Item number 1 is an ordinance adopting the City of Providence's official comprehensive plan.
Thank you. All right. Tonight we have our friends from Department of Planning presenting. I'll call first Mr. Bob Azar. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Robert Azar, Deputy Director of the Department of Planning and Development. Just a couple of introductions here. When we were here last time, there had been a couple of map changes that we put into the record, and since that meeting there are a couple more based on discussions that we've had with individual council members and council staff. So these are all at the request of council members or council staff. So I'll just read these, and they are reflected in this supplemental package that we gave you today. They will be reflected in an updated future land use map and the future zoning map. First is 126 Power Street. That's in the first ward. That would be a change from R1 to I2. In the third ward, 213 and 215 Camp Street, we would designate those as high density residential. And there are areas of Ward 11 and Ward 12. I'm not going to give you all the addresses because it's a fair number of properties. But these are areas that we had proposed for upzoning to R4 that also are in National Register districts. The proposal is that we keep these areas R3, and these are in the Oakland Avenue corridor from between Smith and Eaton Streets, streets between Candace and Pekin and Holden. Those are all in Ward 12, again corresponding with the boundaries of National Register historic districts. And then in Ward 11, this would be along the Pine, Friendship, and Maple Street corridor, again corresponding with the National Register district, so those would all stay as 3-family residential zones. I would like to just add that we've had a busy week working through this with council staff. I want to thank council staff for meeting with us and working with us and hashing out the details. I'll say that there are a couple of areas where we still have some disagreements, but I hope and trust that in the next week we can come to resolution and we can all get this across the finish line at the conclusion of the public hearing. So thank you, staff. Thank you, members of the council and the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Azar. With that, I'll entertain a motion to enter into the record Exhibit F.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Harris and second by Councilman Roy. All in favor, aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. And I'll also entertain a motion to enter into the record Exhibit E, which is a number of letters of testimonies.
So moved.
Motion is made by Councilor Harris, second by Councilman Roy. All in favor, aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you. City Sergeant, would you please bring the list of people that have signed up to testify tonight, please? And before we do that, our policy team, Aaron and June, will also be testifying on the plan.
All right. Thank you, everyone. What I'd like to do is just walk through some of the major amendments that are, currently proposed. They are currently posted on our website, if I'm not mistaken, so that's something that, folks can also refer to. So I'll just walk through and speak on the sections. I'll speak to the changes, and then I'll give a little background on the rationale as to why we decided to do so. So the first of the changes here is that in the economic development chapter, we've added language that supports micro businesses. Across the comprehensive plan, we mentioned small businesses. However, we went in and changed that language, and in all places where that appears, we have small and micro businesses, and understanding that micro businesses are defined as businesses that have 10 employees or less. And the rationale behind that is, to allow the city to direct supports to some of the businesses that may need it the most, and those that are the most popular, across the city. So that's one of the major changes. So, moving from there, you'll see that I'll say in objective H2 regarding the production of new housing for all, we made some changes. So in H2M, we actually added language, and I'll actually read it out fully, and I'll kind of speak to what was crossed out and what was added. So continue to support and establish new programs that encourage developers to build housing that is affordable to all, including by adopting inclusionary zoning measures that are calibrated with tax and subsidy policy changes to enhance development feasibility. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is understanding that if we are to move forward with inclusionary zoning policies, we certainly need to match that with tax subsidy policies. So that is a major change that was added. So moving along, you'll see in it's H2U, same section, completely new language that we've added. Work with community development corporations to conduct an analysis of displacement risk across the city to understand which neighborhoods are most vulnerable and ensure they are prioritized for affordable housing development. And one reason we wanted to add that language is to tie the city to its commitments in anti-displacement in previous studies that were done under previous administrations. So moving along, H2, which is V, we've also added language that we will advocate for stronger tenant protections for renters who are defined as being the most vulnerable to displacement. And that is understanding that on the local level, there's limited things that the city can do to protect tenants and enhance tenant rights. But it speaks to our commitment to advocate for these changes at the state level. So that is that. Moving next, which is H2W, I'll read some of the new language that we've added as well. Work with RIPDA to ensure affordable housing is developed along new transit corridors. And that basically is to ensure that the city is supporting high density developments along the transit corridors because that makes the most sense. So moving from H2, so also in the housing chapter, we've added language to objective H3 regarding special needs housing. And in that language, let me find this here. So we want to ensure that all city policies addressing homelessness and homelessness encampments on public property follow the guidelines outlined by the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. So we actually have spoke publicly on some of our committees on the council side, but the administration spoke to those being the guidelines that we do follow when we're dealing with our unhoused folks in the city. So we want to enshrine that into this ordinance to bind us in that way moving forward. So,
Excuse me a second, Aaron.
yes.
Can everybody hear in the back? Is that okay? No? So, please.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. So that was H3J. Moving along to H3K, we've added language to formally sanction temporary homeless encampments in non-residential areas to improve safety and public health of unhoused residents. And this is just support for future ordinance and policy considerations for the city moving forward to potentially set up a scenario where we can have recognized and permitted temporary encampments to in places where we can understand that folks are safe as they can be. Some of the problems and issues with encampments, at least what has been publicly commented on, is that, ambulances and emergency services do not know where folks are and they can't get there, and this is one way to approach and tackle that issue. So, moving along, so in the mobility chapter, let's see, we've actually, so in objective M1, in the strategy N, we actually added language, and it's very simple. So in M1K, we are encouraging large employers and institutions to offer subsidized transit passes. We've added language that would hold the city to those same standards officially, so that we can offer City of Providence employees subsidized transit passes as well. So that is that. Then next up, in the last meeting, we officially struck out the language speaking to RIPTA and just the language regarding the transfer hub, the hub in Kennedy Plaza. Let's see. So that one had been decided. So moving along, also in the mobility chapter, we added some of the following language here. Let's see. So in terms of like gas stations, so M5K, we've added stronger language. Instead of discouraging the development, we've added the language, prohibit the development of new gas stations within the city limits while prioritizing the development of electric vehicle charging stations. And that lines us up with all of our climate goals and lines us up with the city's climate justice plan. That's that. Next, moving along in the same chapter and section, M52, when speaking to the overnight parking program, we just added some language, and I'll read it out here. Improve overnight parking permit program to increase participation by evaluating the permit cost for vehicles registered in Providence, vehicles registered in Rhode Island, and vehicles that are registered out of state. And this supports the analysis of the cost prohibitions that some of the residents are actually feeling when trying to purchase these permits, understanding that the city is trying to expand the program. So that supports there. So then moving along, in the land use chapter, we made the following additions to objective LU2 regarding direct growth. So one of the things that we added, and you'll see in LU2B, the prioritizing the elimination of parking minimums where possible. And this simply, allows the city through the city plan commissioner or whatever body to actually make a case-by-case determination on, parking requirements per development. That's the policy behind that. Let's see. And so moving along also in the land use chapter in LU3K, we do have language regarding inclusionary zoning that I will mention here. Let's see. So this is the language that's been added. Adopt inclusionary zoning measures that are calibrated with tax and subsidy policy changes to enhance development feasibility. So that had been added, and then I will continue to move along. So one of the biggest pieces that are in here, and it's also in the land use chapter, under the chapter, how do we grow, when we're talking about business industrial and the waterfront port subsections, we actually, so when it comes to the Port of Providence, there are actually only two designated zoning areas that encompasses the whole area, and that is M2, which is the General Industrial District, and then we have W3, which is Port Maritime Industrial District. So what we did, obviously, the Conservation Law Foundation came before this body and testified to a multitude of uses that they would like to be prohibited from getting started moving forward. And in both sections, we actually just add language speaking specifically to those 24 different uses. And I won't go through each of the 24, but obviously they are very much related to the fossil fuel industry and a lot of things that are just bad for the environment and bad for climate overall. And again, this is a major change that just lines up with a lot of the commitments that the city's already made, especially our climate justice plan. So, continuing to move along, and I promise it won't be too much longer. In the land use chapter, we made the following amendments to objective LU7 regarding institutional growth and the preservation of neighborhoods. So I'll read. So we would, in LU7F, we would like to require colleges and universities to anonymously track and report on off-campus student housing to ensure accountability in managing student behavior, as well as identifying and addressing inappropriate conduct of students living off campus. And for privacy reasons, obviously, we're not going to ask colleges and universities to tell us the names of students and where they're living. But from a public safety perspective, it is good for the city to know where the concentrations of student housing is. And this is nothing new. There are multiple cities that actually have ordinances such as this on the books, and the closest is Boston, which does the same. So that is that. So moving along, also in the land use chapter, in LU9, relating to design and new development, what I'll actually do, so we worked with, the planning department on this language, and it is, for, design standards. So LU9C, I'll just read it in its entirety. Strengthen design regulations in residential and neighborhood commercial areas to promote a high-quality built environment while ensuring new design regulations do not unnecessarily increase the cost of development or make the development review process less efficient or unpredictable. And then within that language, we also understand that one of the things that we certainly never want to burden or slow down is the development of affordable housing in the city. So moving on to LU9F, establish an ad hoc committee to advise on the creation of design regulations. The committee should include developers, architects, and designers, and community stakeholders. So this, simply just leverages the, community architects and design, folks with design background to be involved in this process. So the folks who do have the most expertise, they certainly should be at the table here. And then the last piece there, LU9, conduct staff and board-level design review processes to ensure compliance with new design regulations. And we see this as, allowing the, the city and city staff to have somewhat of authority on, quality control and the direction that they're going. So moving along also in the land use chapter, LU11, related to housing, I actually already spoke to some of this language about, inclusionary zoning, but we actually used this same language and we placed it into multiple areas where it was relevant, but I'll just read it one more time. Adopt inclusionary zoning measures that are calibrated with the tax and subsidy policy changes to enhance development feasibility. So that is laced in, I believe, 2 or 3 different locations across the plan. So let's see here. All right. So moving along in the land use chapter, LU12 here. Go to E now. Okay. Yep, E, new language here, and I'll read this through here. Encourage the use of non-auto transportation options through land use controls and transportation demand management incentives, including prioritizing bike lanes and infrastructure for safe pedestrian access via high-quality sidewalks and protected lanes. And this aligns us with, the city's commitment to being a Vision Zero city. It's very important policy shift, and this happened, earlier in the year. But this aligns us along those goals. So then LU12F also added, and I think this is the last one we have here, so work with RIPTA to build out appropriate locations for transit infrastructure, including current work to expand and build out the R line. And this again just ensures that the city, we're working collaboratively with RIPTA and understanding their long-term plans, so that we are prioritizing, high-density projects, across their transit lines and their corridors. So again, those are the major changes in addition to, what Bob brought up regarding, the map change requests. So with that said, Chairman, I think that summarizes the major changes that are proposed and before us now.
Chairman, if I could just add
Absolutely, go ahead.
a couple things.
Sure.
Good evening, Gene Rose, Chief of Staff for the Council. Really appreciate Mr. Eastergardner's overview here. Just want to point out a few things process-wise. So first of all, as was mentioned, all of Council's proposed amendments are up live on the City Council's website, right on the homepage. The full redlined version of the ordinance is up there for the public to look and see. And I also want to point out that while there may be limited substitutions this evening, the vast majority, at least the bulk of this amendment package will be introduced formally next Wednesday at a public hearing at 5:30 in this room. So there will be a full week in addition to testimony tonight and testimony as well next Wednesday evening for folks to review and comment on any additional council changes that have come from all 15 members in collaboration with city staff and closely with their communities.
Thank you so much, and thanks again for the hard work and the time you put into this. All right, so let's call upon the people that have signed up to testify, and the first person will be Cameron LaFrancière. Good evening.
Am I on?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm a Ward 1 member. I live in Wayland Square. I just have a few important asks of the City Council, and I do support most of what's in the plan.
Thank you. And just so
Specifically-
you know, and everyone else, you will get 2 minutes
Okay,
to testify. Thank you.
So, as we know, I really appreciate the addition of upzoning or mixed-use developments around transit. That's very important, as we know that RIPTA's high-capacity transit study is currently in play, and we will need hundreds of millions of dollars from the Federal Transit Administration. We have other cities that are competing for the same exact programs, like light rail and bus rapid transit. Salt Lake City has done, I think, 5 of these, and this is like, we're only doing 1. For this to actually happen, we really do need to at least allow for medium density residential within a half-mile walk shed. We need to allow for commercial zoning along the corridors, which include all along Allens Ave, as well as North Main Street and Broad Street. Furthermore, the importance goes beyond just this FTA grant opportunity. We have only by right in mixed-use transit-rich areas 4 stories. This is something that's a serious issue because this is specifically important for transit-oriented development overall. As we know, most of RIPTA's bus routes are along the major thoroughfares of the city, which are all mixed use and have consistent commercial zoning, including Atwells, Cranston Street, Broad Street, Elmwood, Smith, Hope, Waterman, Angel. All of these places, you can only have 4 stories by right. And frankly, if we want to allow for preservation in the city, in low-density areas of the city, we need to allow infill development around transit, especially if we're going to get rid of, gas stations by right, if we're going to get rid of, the need to not just let the market decide on parking minimums. Furthermore, I think it's very important that we consider when it comes to eliminating parking minimums, we're not getting rid of parking. We are letting the market decide how much parking is needed. For example, in the North End, I know that a couple people commented regarding Ross's district. That's something that, that area of the city will need more parking. If we let the market decide that, rather than having government red tape, which we currently do and will allow for if we don't completely eliminate parking minimums, which 80 cities, including Bridgeport, Hartford, Connecticut, these are not places that have great transit, let's be real, right? Like, if they can do it, why can't we? If we're going to be leading forward on other things, why can't we do it on this as well? So I also think that banning gas stations is a great idea. We're going to have a climate-friendly future. We need to prioritize that. So I just want you to take that into consideration and understand that transit-oriented development and climate-friendly future is something that we're going to need all over the city. And we're going to need mixed-use, dense commercial corridors and walk sheds. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Matthew Schelling. Matthew Schelling. Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Matthew Schelling, and I live in Ward 2. My wife and I decided to move to Providence about 5 years ago. Moving to a dense place with good bones for a car-light lifestyle was a key factor in our decision. While we do own a car, we walk, bike, or use transit for all trips possible. and we would love to find a place here in Providence to settle down and raise a family, and I believe the proposed amendments by Providence Urbanist Network will help Providence be the kind of city I'd like to have a family in: affordable, walkable, and green. Providence Urbanist Network's asks include expanding the transit-oriented development overlay to support RIPTA's high-capacity transit initiative, allowing 5 stories by right in high-density residential and commercial districts. This will improve affordability and climate action by allowing more residents to live walking distance to shops and services for their daily needs. And 3, eliminating parking minimums citywide for all zones to allow individual places decide how much parking is needed and allow the market to decide that, just as over 80 cities of town have done for affordability and environmental reasons. Much of my buildings, parking goes unused, and I wish it could be grass or trees or anything other than concrete. I also support the proposed amendment to ban new gas stations citywide, as there are already 41, and this space should be used for other housing and economic development that benefits all residents of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Dylan Giles. Good evening, Dylan.
Can you hear me? Yeah, my name is Dylan Giles with the Providence Streets Coalition. Thank you to Chairman Espinal and to the Ordinance Committee for hearing our testimony tonight and continuing to engage with the public. I've spoken previously to this committee about removing parking minimums. We've heard from community members, nonprofit housing developers, neighborhood organizations who support allowing the market to determine market and not the zoning code to determine how much parking a project needs. And I'm pleased to see the supportive amendment here to remove parking minimums in certain zones. The Providence Streets Coalition will continue to advocate for the full removal citywide, freeing the city of these regressive policies once and for all before we spend the next decade building unnecessary parking, further pricing people out of the city, and exacerbating our housing crisis. Among the many worthy aspirations and goals in the comprehensive plan draft, the very first one is this: protect, preserve, and restore the natural environment. And within that goal, a very clear and concise explanation. We must be prepared for and facilitate the transition to a post-fossil fuel existence. One clear and direct measure that we are pleased to see tonight: prohibit new gas stations in the city. There are already more than 40 gas stations in the city of Providence, not to mention the dozens in the surrounding cities and towns. Aside from their sprawling, auto-centered land use, gas stations are the very definition of fossil fuel infrastructure. 2 years ago, despite widespread opposition from the community, a new gas station was built just 100 feet from the Woonasquatucket River watershed, a watershed currently undergoing rehabilitation after centuries of industrial pollution. Additionally, research has found that rates of cancer are higher in areas surrounding gas stations. In spite of all of this opposition, the station was allowed by right, and the city's hands were tied to prevent it. This is not just a land use issue, it's a climate justice issue. As we prepare for that post-fossil fuel existence imagined in this document, the answer to fossil fuel infrastructures can no longer be our hands are tied. It's time to make bold moves toward freeing ourselves from fossil fuel dependence. Thank you for taking those tonight.
Thank you. Tyler Romero.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Tyler Romero. I live in Ward 3 at 174th Street, and I wanted to just briefly talk about a few things specifically concerning additions I'd like to see added to the comprehensive plan. One would be to expand the transit-oriented development overlay to support RIPTA's high-capacity transit initiative. This would allow for federal funds to be used and contributed to our community without burdening existing tax base. Next would be to allow 5 stories built by right in high-density residential and commercial districts to address affordability and climate resiliency, and to allow people to walk to stores, services, and neighbors more efficiently. Density, at the end of the day, is a financial benefit. It allows more services to be provided to more people with less cost. Next is to eliminate parking minimums citywide for all zones, and to allow the market to decide what parking needs for certain building needs rather than the city. This goes towards our climate resiliency for land use space and also for water runoff as well. Next is I would agree that we need to ban new gas stations citywide, as there are already over 40 in the city, as we move away from a car-centric society and more to multimodal transit and to address climate resiliency. Last, I wanted to just briefly talk about the proposed amendment to establish a design review board. First is that design is subjective. Design changes over time. As we look through our community design, I think it's a good thing that we can pinpoint certain designs, say, wow, that was from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Design allows community and residents to organically build over time. Specifically, the language in this amendment is at best contradictory. It says that no new cost or time will be made because of this review board. That's just not going to happen. And additionally, what would be the remedy if it does, and who enforces it? The reality is that review does make cost and time increase, and if you want to move forward on that, feel free to do so, but at least create a remedy or enforcement mechanism to hold people accountable. Finally, a Providence Journal article titled "Legally Bland: Why Providence's Much-Needed Housing Stock Looks Ugly and Can Be Fixed" came out a couple days ago, reminiscing about our new housing that's been built over the past couple years. I would just say this: I think it's extraordinarily disrespectful at a time when the median Providence home costs $530,000, rent is $2,045, and we have unhoused people living in the street. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Julian Drix. It's right after Mr. Drix, Councilman. My apologies. Good evening.
Good evening, greetings. My name is Julian Drix. I live in the Washington Park neighborhood. I'm here not just on behalf of myself, but as the chair of the Providence Sustainability Commission, one of the city's boards and commissions. I've been working on issues of environmental and climate justice been on the commission since 2019. I've been working on environmental justice for almost 15 years or more. This comprehensive plan is over a long period of time. And looking into the future, just looking back on the last 10 years, the number of disasters we have had in the Port of Providence with overturned tankers, with fires, with near pipeline explosions, not to mention the daily odors that we in the neighborhood have to deal with. We have been working with the city with the climate justice plan. We have an incredible vision already laid out for the future of what we can do to meet the many challenges needed for addressing climate change and centering justice and equity. And we've been working with the city on a zoning study and then the comprehensive plan. We, as a commission, shared a letter with you all back in the spring. It was 16 pages long, filled with lots of information and details and data. I do not need to repeat all of that here tonight. That letter prompted some amendments because the first version of the comprehensive plan draft from the city fell far short and did not have what it needed in it. In response to our commission's letter, the city did add some changes, opening up the possibility for prohibiting certain harmful, the most harmful polluting industries in the port. So there were some positive changes, but the commission met to discuss and decided that they were not nearly enough and much more was needed. I was planning to come here tonight and share some detail around what else would be needed, but I am incredibly grateful for the work that has been put in and for the amendments that the City Council is proposing. So many thanks to the City Council leadership, all members of the council, and the staff who have put these changes together. This is a really incredible set of amendments that are being proposed that really center what the climate justice plan is and is about into the city's most important policy document. It feels like a very, unfortunately, rare moment to have, to be here and to have, this is what it looks like when city government and elected officials listen to people, listen to grassroots organizations, and do the right thing, and are willing to stand up to the powerful lobbyists that want to keep the status quo. So I am just here to give strong support for all of these amendments, and particularly protecting the port from heavy polluters, for the inclusionary zoning, the anti-displacement strategies, working towards zero carbon emissions, standing up for the right of unhoused citizens and people in the city, the ending parking minimums, the gas station ban. These are all really powerful, really visionary leadership, and I'm very grateful for you all. So thank you, and looking forward to seeing these passed.
Thank you, Mr. Drix. So tonight we are joined by Council President Rachel Miller, Councilman Goncalves, Pro Tem Pichado, and Councilwoman Anthony. And with that, Councilwoman Enderwath, my apologies. Councilman Sanchez, why are you in the back over there? Come on up here. All right. Well, thank you for being here anyway. Councilman Goncalves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been pretty vocal about many things in this comprehensive plan, specifically strengthening historic preservation, the Fox Point Wickeden Historic District Overlay, which I hope this body will support as we undergo that process, Neighborhood Design Review Committee, which has been led by my colleague Councilwoman Anthony, anti-displacement and anti-demolition policies. I want to really thank everyone who came out tonight to share your thoughts, particularly about environmental issues. We've heard feedback from the last several speakers loud and clear. This is an issue where we can take a bold stance tonight. And I've already been discussing this with the planning department, and I want to emphasize that the voices of the people in our community matter. As such, I urge my colleagues to take a stance and make a motion right now to change the language in M5K from discourage to prohibit the development of new gas stations within city limits. This would specifically read, instead of discourage, prohibit the development of new gas stations within city limits while prioritizing the development of EV charging stations. Other cities have ordinances on the books that ban or limit building new gas stations, including Petaluma, California. We've got Memphis, Tennessee, Louisville, Colorado. Los Angeles, in fact, has a pending ban in the works. And this is an important step in prioritizing and codifying the transition to a more sustainable future here in Providence. By becoming the first city on the East Coast to potentially prohibit new gas stations, Providence can lead the way in reducing carbon emissions while promoting cleaner, greener energy investments. So I hope that we'll take a stand tonight in advancing sustainable energy alternatives. Existing stations will continue to serve our community, remaining a valuable resource, and I hope that we can gradually, as a body, shift towards moving toward a more cleaner, greener energy future here in the city of Providence. So I hope one of my colleagues will take me up and make that motion tonight.
Thank you, Councilman. Next, we have Claudia Wave.
There we go.
That's better.
Okay. All right. Good evening, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Claudia Wack, and I live in Ward 3 in the Summit neighborhood. I have a few comments tonight, just seconding some of the previous calls that I urge the council to take an approach to the comprehensive plan and the draft amendments that would maximize housing affordability in this moment where the housing shortage and the housing cost crisis is so dire. So first, I would applaud the proposed amendment strengthening language on reducing or eliminating parking minimums. We know based on studies that for each additional parking space that's required, whether it's surface parking or structured parking, that adds between $25,000 or $60,000 per space to the cost of constructing a new housing unit, and that's a cost that's going to be added on, passed through, at least in some part, to residents. In a city where 20% of households have no car, and in some neighborhoods that's as high as 40% of households, this is a common sense step that would put us in good company with many peer cities, I think over 80 peer cities around the country. Second, I just wanted to also call out and add a little bit of color to something that was mentioned previously about allowing a fifth story by right in high density zones. I think this is a step that would help more units get built. It would, by helping more units get built, go towards increasing housing affordability. But something that I also want to point out is that a 5-story building is usually the first building height at which it's feasible to install an elevator. 4 stories and below, it's usually not economically feasible because installing an elevator is very expensive. And so adding more 5 stories around the city, particularly in areas that are transit proximate, amenity proximate, is going to help us create more buildings around the city that are physically accessible to folks like seniors, people with disabilities. And I think, many of you can probably appreciate that Providence's very old housing stock is not a housing stock that generally meets the description of being accessible to a lot of those types of folks. So just to add a little bit of color of why that extra 5th story can be so critical in unlocking new housing opportunities. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much, and I would urge you to take both of those steps.
Thank you. Jose Comey.
Hi,
Good
good
evening.
evening. My name's Jose Comey. I'm here as a resident, also representing Washington Park Neighborhood Association. I'm just going to read tonight a letter from Professor Meredith Hastings, and it's about the pollution. It is very clear in the Breathe Providence Network data that the current operations covered in the Greater Port of Providence overlay, the air quality is directly impacted, and poor air quality is enhanced by operations at the port and operations that support productivities. Example given, diesel truck traffic. It is also clear that expanding any of those operations without active measures to reduce current air pollution and carbon emissions would add to poor air quality, unhealthy air quality events, and work against the city and state plan of decarbonization. Given the heavy respiratory disease burdens in these communities, which again I'm also part of, and workers that are part of and surround the Greater Port of Providence, there is an absolute need to address the air quality and carbon emissions effectively. This needs to work in a way that addresses the community's quality of life, reduces harm to these communities and other workers, and decreases the impact in our healthcare system in the city and the state. Again, this is from Professor Meredith Hastings, who wasn't able to be here, but these are her words. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Linda Perry.
My name is Linda Perry, and I live in Washington Park, and I'm speaking for Racial Environmental Justice Committee. April Brown, again, was not able to be here. So she says, Dear President Rachel Miller and members of the Committee of Ordinances, the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee has for 7 years been a clear voice for a just Providence by co-authoring the climate justice plan. We engaged in a process with the city that guaranteed a greener city by 2030. For us, that meant we wanted the local municipality to engage in deep democracy and promote the collective priorities of the community so that the entirety of the city can live well. This current comprehensive plan has missed the mark. Utilizing the spectrum of community engagement framework, this entire process has only engaged community from a space of marginalization, placation, and tokenism. We prefer that the process give the community a true voice coupled with delegated power and community ownership. Since that is not what has happened here, happened here are the specifics of what needs to be added to the plan for this semblance in order so the next 10 years are a success for the administration and its council as it relates to environmental injustices. This past spring, we engaged in 20 community members in collaboration data in the process of Brown University called Breathe Providence Task Force. We were able to determine that there is no active data collection at the municipality level to determine toxic air quality that community members can activate. The task force proposed using the 311 platform as a stopgap to collect environmental data for the city to use for ordinance creation. The Rhode Island Recycled Metals, a scrap metal operation on Allens Avenue that the city gave a cease and desist to stop working recently, and it was fined $25,000 last month. There is no mention in this plan how to prevent the continuation of the harm this business poses to our community. For us, the Rhode Island Metals Recycling needs to stop operating with their history of violations to our residents' well-being hang in the balance. The community is in jeopardy by its existence. There needs to be a the creation of a greater Port of Providence overlay district, and we specifically referring to the letter that CLF, Conservation Law Foundation, drafted and is currently in this committee's possession. We co-sign to all the recommendations in that matter. We are deeply concerned about the environmental injustice of the emissions of diesel exhaust throughout the city and the harm that it poses to our community. Finally, we recommend that the committee not allow this version of the comprehensive plan to go forward to a vote without making significant changes to provide a more robust language and a deeper alignment to the climate justice plan. Sincerely, April Brown, Director of REJC. Now, this didn't get submitted, but I'd like to give this to you, if I may.
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Stang.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Richard Stang with Conservation Law Foundation. I work right here in Providence on Promenade Street. I just want to say that thank you very much for consideration on the comments that we provided. I've seen that in the amendments, they've been incorporated. We wholly support the amendments. I would just have to add that, you know, my age, I've been around long enough for the last starting over 20 years ago under the guise of working waterfront and job creation. the voices of the people of the communities down here have not been listened to, and what has resulted is the types of organizations or operations that have come in large part, have not been productive from an environmental health point of view, a community health point of view. The problem is, because they're there now, it's very hard to have them moved out or eventually transitioned with more cleaner jobs that everyone wants. The types of jobs that we're starting to see coming in through the Prov Port. These changes will at least put a stop to the expansion and will allow for the eventual replacement of these dirty industries with clean industries. So thank you very much for taking that, and I hope that this passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Flynn. Good evening
to the council, and thank you for your time and consideration. I'm a resident of Ward 1. I've lived there for almost 20 years, and I'm a member of PUN. I'd like to testify today in support of the comprehensive plan and to encourage you to consider further changes. When you're thinking about this, I encourage you not to overcomplicate it. Keep things simple. And in this case, I'd like to advise you to take a utilitarian framework in mind. And I know that that approach to ethics gets bad rap, and to a certain extent that's fair. It's not a very good guideline to how often you should visit your mother. But the principle of the most good for the most people is something that is useful in terms of public policy, and it's something that you should well keep in mind when it comes to the comprehensive plan. Specifically, if you live in Providence, you either own or you rent, like I do. And in that regard, when it comes to housing, you are a consumer in the marketplace. And as a consumer, and I know there's more to it, but again, we're keeping it simple, your greatest power is to take or spend your money. And if you don't believe me that as a consumer, your strongest move is to leave the table when you don't like the terms offered, try walking out of a car dealership before they've taken your money. They really don't want to let you do it. And that's the problem we have in Providence. There just aren't enough houses for the people who want to live in them. So as consumers, as renters especially, we're put in a weak position. All the problems people are talking about, environmental health, disability access, transit access, all of those are worsened by insufficient housing stock. And what we need is more housing. And so I'm encouraging you to consider expanding the TOD overlay and especially to increase the height of by-right buildings in high-density areas. You're going to hear, you have heard, I've been to previous meetings, complaints from people, and the complaints are reasonable. They are, construction is obnoxious. People looking for parking spaces can be bothersome, and basically new people means more demand on the city services. And those are fair complaints, I understand them. So if you want to address the need for housing in a way that minimizes those complaints, which I don't share, I'm a big believer in this being a welcoming city, a city that attracts people from all across the country, a city that throws its arms to people who want to come here, work, start new businesses, pay taxes, because that's what everyone who comes into this city is going to do. And we need more taxpayers for some of the amendments that have been suggested in the comprehensive plan to make sure that we have the tax base to support protecting people with low incomes from displacement, to ensure that we take care of the city's most vulnerable residents. And to that end, we need to ensure that the new housing is built as densely as possible. It minimizes the construction time. It minimizes the impact on the neighborhood. If we're going to have new buildings, they should be big buildings. And I think that increasing the by-right height limitation is the way to do that, and making sure that we abolish parking minimums throughout the city, and not just by zone, potentially in the future, as is being discussed now. I think this is a time for bold action, and I understand that abolishing parking minimums may seem like a dramatic step, but it's important to remember what the council would be doing is allowing the construction of buildings with fewer parking spaces, not demanding them. So things happen slowly in Providence, and things happen slowly in Rhode Island. I don't think you're going to see a lot of new developers chomping at the bit to build giant houses with no parking spaces. It's going to take time. We need to give developers the chance to respond to the demands of the market and allow for more housing to be built. Thank you for listening to my comments. Thank you for taking this under consideration. And I encourage you to build a Providence that welcomes as many people as possible, because that's how we get more nurses, that's how we get more teachers, that's how we get a better future for the city as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Miller. Good evening.
Good evening. Derek Miller, 131 Tabor Avenue, east side of Providence. First, I wanted to thank everyone at the planning office for all the work that's gone into this plan, which I think is very forward-looking. My home is in a rather historic area north of Wayland Square, and my neighborhood is proposed for upzoning to R3, which I strongly support. Every house on my street has 3 full floors, but they contain just 1 or 2 units, with really no option to add more. The proposed plan would allow the creation of another apartment within most homes while maintaining the external appearance of the property. It makes a lot of sense to take an 8-bedroom house and create an additional unit within it. This unit can be used for rental housing, of course, but also many good purposes beyond rental housing. It can be a home for kids returning from college, long-term guests, exchange students or an au pair, or the care of elderly relatives that want to live independently. In short, this proposed upzoning change provides badly needed versatility. It adapts our zoning code to the way we already live, rather than the way we live being dictated by the zoning code. The upzoning will create a financial incentive for incrementally more housing while maintaining the current look and texture of the neighborhood. I urge you to approve the upzoning within the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Saxon.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Here we go. Members of the council, thank you so much for your service and all you do for our city. I'd like to testify in favor of the comprehensive plan. I'm also a member of the Providence Urbanist Network. I live on Wickenden Street in Ward 1. I'm gladdened to see the new housing in my ward greatly. I also am very pleased by most of the amendments in favor of abolishing parking minimums, and I encourage you to tighten that language to just end parking minimums in the city. Likewise, the gas station amendment. I'd like to point out that the concern expressed about climate and about justice and about Providence as a place that really has character and values, none of that can be achievable if we water down the pro-housing component of this plan. And so all of our talk about environmental, hitting our climate goals for carbon emissions, the #1 emissions are cars. We want clean jobs. How about allowing people even who have dirty jobs to walk to work or bike there? Higher density housing allows that. I live within view of a 6-story building, Fox Point Manor. It's also affordable. I find it quite beautiful. But to hear a handful of my neighbors, it seems like it's this abomination that's destroying the character of our city because it is higher than 5 stories. I strongly urge you to make 5 stories the new by right minimum in higher density areas for the aforementioned cost and accessibility reasons. I don't see why this one extra floor is going to harm anyone. And while we're talking about character, the character of Providence is a home for creative people, for newcomers of diverse backgrounds, and oddballs, and eccentrics, and entrepreneurs, and refugees. And if it is not affordable to live here, we are not preserving the character of any of our neighborhoods. And I know what is coming, and you are going to hear some bad faith testimony about greedy developers who only care about the bottom line in favor of making it harder to build housing. But at the current point, I don't think this is credible testimony coming from people who already live in luxury housing themselves and are themselves quite overrepresented in the politics of our city. Everybody indeed should have a voice. And I think that, look, I'm a colonial historian. I love old buildings and architecture. But a design review commission that has any power to slow anything down is going to raise costs. And we've seen this happen in other cities. It is a poison pill. And so unless it is advisory and is jogging alongside this process with no power to slow it down and offer suggestions, I don't think this is something we can afford at this time. I don't see why somebody building an ugly building is any of my business. I'm a property owner in the city, and it never occurred to me that I had the power to tell somebody else what to do on their own property as long as they're not hurting anybody. That happens in so many other cases. With regards to business, I may not agree with. I don't see why the one time it's going to help lower income people and renters that now all of a sudden we're going to talk about greedy business people who don't have the well-being of ordinary people in mind. I'll remind you, people work in housing construction, people work in the trades. That is an important part of our community as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, so that concludes the first list of testifiers. Any questions or comments from our committee members? Councilor Royas.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'd like to take some action today and entertain a motion, but before I do, I just want to thank the Senior Deputy Majority Leader and Councilor of Ward 1, Councilman John Gonzalez, for his advocacy on this issue. I want to entertain a motion to amend the mobility chapter of the comp plan regarding the driving section M5, making a motion to amend section N5, line K, and I'd like to specifically strike out the word discourage and substitute it with prohibit. So it reads, prohibit the development of new gas stations within city limit. Then I would like to add, while prioritizing the development of EV charging stations. This proposed amendment aligns with the climate justice plan as we seek to reduce our carbon footprint in the city of Providence, and of course reserve precious land to build more housing here. And so if you all would second that.
Well, motion is made by Councilor Royas.
Second, Mr.
And
Chair.
it's second by Councilor Harris. All in favor, aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Okay, next I have Sharon Still. Sharon Steele. Good evening, Sharon.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. Sharon Steele, President of the Jewelry District Association. I have two issues. One, you have heard from me before, and I'm going to start this by quoting a statement that I received back from the planning department in an email interchange that I had. And it starts by saying, or it finishes by saying, we've always thought of it, the Jewelry District, as a sub-district of downtown, like Down City or Capital Center. So I'm now here to refute that and to say that Down City is a euphemism, the hip phrase for downtown, and Capital Center reflects some parcels that were in the Capital Center, never a neighborhood. Unlike the Jewelry District, which is a neighborhood. And for those of you who don't know a lot about us, let me tell you what's in the Jewelry District today. We have 1,000 residential condo owners and tenants. We have institution, plural, Brown's Medical School, Brown's School of Public Health, Brown's School for Professional Studies, Brown's Bioscience Lab, the Legaretta Cancer Center, URI's School of Nursing, Rhode Island College's School of Nursing, Lifespan's administrative offices and labs, Coastal Medical's primary practice building, and the Cambridge Innovation Center with 250 independent business owner users. In addition to that, we have businesses and we have restaurants. Under construction, we have 300,000 square feet, the new Danoff Life Sciences Laboratories, which will employ 700 people. We have the State Lab, 200,000 square feet, that will employ 300 people. We have 200 residential units that are about to be constructed on a private site. We have on parcels 14 and 15 another 200 units that are under design. On parcel 2, we have 200 units approved that will be built in 2025. And on parcel 5, 9 proposals came in several weeks ago. Each one has a minimum of 200 new residential units. So, may I suggest to you that we need a map that reflects that the Jewelry District is a neighborhood. In 1991, it was designated, when it was a historic jewelry district, and 6 years later, the Secretary of State recognized it as the Jewelry District. I implore the Planning Department to give the Jewelry District its designation on the map as a neighborhood. We are not a subset of anything, certainly not downtown. If I were to ask all those people in all those buildings where they are, they will tell you that they operate in the Jewelry District. That's part 1. Here's part 2.
30 seconds, Sharon.
We just saw revisions for the very first time. We are expected to come back a week from tonight. We have to pull together our neighborhood, have meetings, make decisions, what should stay, what should go, what should be included. May I suggest that we put that off for 1 more week so we have an appropriate amount of time to give something that is going to be in place for the next 10 years of development. Can we at least give it another week? Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Victor. And before Mr. Doug Victor, Councilman Goncalves, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with my constituent here, Sharon Steele, on this issue. As you know, there are hundreds of new units that are being built specifically in the Jewelry District. So I'd like to defer specifically to Bob Azar on this question. Can you speak to why the Jewelry District isn't being more recognized in the comp plan, and can we officially recognize them as a neighborhood?
Bob, Mr. Azar, you can if you want to, but you don't have to answer that, being that it's at a public comment. I feel that there were conversations that were had, and I'm sure back and forth, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, that's
it's
okay.
completely up to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond in very, very briefly. We have one map in the comprehensive plan that is our growth strategy map, and we put the neighborhood names on that plan for reference. We were not intending in this comprehensive plan to change the neighborhood map to recognize neighborhoods in a way that had not been recognized before. The neighborhood boundaries that we have were created many decades ago through a process that I'm not familiar with, and I know that in decades before that there had been other iterations of neighborhood maps. How we think about the city and its neighborhoods is in some ways subjective. These aren't hard and fast lines. We did have a comment about the fact that the Jewelry District was not listed on that map when we first published it. So we decided that if we were going to identify the Jewelry District, that it would also be appropriate to identify other sub-districts of downtown. And I would disagree with Ms. Steele about the names of Down City and Capitol Center. Those have been used for many decades. And I think they're just as appropriate monikers for neighborhood sub-districts as Jewelry District. I don't disagree that the Jewelry District is a neighborhood. It's just not something that is on the city's sort of official list of neighborhoods. I don't really, it's not really all that important to me, you know, what that map, the neighborhood names on that map. What's important is what the map is depicting, which is where we want to see growth in the city. I'm happy to have another conversation with our City Plan Commission about maybe revisiting the neighborhood names that we use. You know, these days maybe some of them are outmoded, maybe there are other names that we should be using. There are other places that are represented by neighborhood groups like West Broadway and Summit that aren't official neighborhood names. I'm more than willing to have that conversation, but it's just really not the kind of thing that needs to be debated in a comprehensive plan. I think we should be talking about the important policies of growth and change in our city. And, you know, frankly, I don't know that we need to talk about individual neighborhoods in this plan at all. This is a plan that's meant to be for the whole city.
Thank you, Mr. Azar. Doug Victor, please. Councilwoman Anthony. I'm sorry, Doug. I'm going to give you extra time only because I called twice upon you, but then I have the council people that has so important message.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor, for giving me a minute. I just want to support my fellow councilor Goncalves on this very issue. The Jewelry District is not like Summit. It's not like our other neighborhoods that haven't necessarily been recognized on the map. The Jewelry District is a vibrant neighborhood that is hosting the biggest amount of development we have in this city. I'm glad to hear the planning director say that it really doesn't make that much difference to him. I think it makes a lot of difference to the Jewelry District Neighborhood Association. I think it's not a big ask to amend the enhanced growth map to separate out the Jewelry District from the downtown. It doesn't change the enhanced growth colors, it doesn't change any of that, but it recognizes a neighborhood that is vibrant and has very active participation and really supports the city in a way that other neighborhoods don't. So I would also ask that we amend the map on page 69 on the enhanced growth map to separate out the jewelry district from just the downtown area. If it's not a big deal, let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Pro Tem Pichardo.
I just have a question for clarification for Mr. Azar. When you designate neighborhoods, do they come under other criterias? In particular when it comes to housing and all the other criterias, transportation and so forth. Do you have to carve out any other special regulations, housing standards, affordable housing in the areas?
Yeah, the answer is no. We don't use neighborhood boundaries as for any official policy making. And I will say that we do label the jewelry district, Down City, and Capital Center on that growth map for what it's worth. And I will also say that we are more than happy to increase the font size of those labels. I think that's what we're talking about.
All right, thank you, Mr. Azar. I mean, let's concentrate on what we were doing. My apologies. Dog Victor, please. Mr. Dog Victor. Apologies to you, sir. Go right ahead.
Thank you. City Council, thank you for giving good attention to this. This is a big, big bite. So how do I want to start? First of all, I would like to say that Providence is a legacy city. Providence is noted for its historic nature. It is a city that has, unlike many other cities in the country, been overdeveloped in a way that diminishes the historic fabric of the city. There has to be a way in this comprehensive plan to protect the historic legacies of our neighborhoods, at the same time to increase housing possibilities. What we see here, in my estimation, is a green light to development in a way that Providence has never seen before. That is very disturbing. I cannot imagine coming back in 30 years when I'm 110 and envisioning what this city might look like and feeling so heartbroken. So I want you to please, please, please consider amending this plan, giving a direction to the planning department to amend the plan so that it protects the fabric, the historic fabric of our city. There are very few cities in this country that are left that haven't been ravaged with development. This comprehensive plan is laying down a green light for development that we've never seen the likes of before, and I believe will have an impact similar, historically looking back, will have an impact similar to when the highways came in, to when the FHA loans started redlining and yellowlining neighborhoods that have left their legacies on this city, and urban renewal that came. And we know those stories. You're tasked to look in your hearts, and you're tasked with this vote to approve or reject. That's your task. I know you know that. I want to implore you to protect the historic legacy of our city. And one other point, 10 years is a long time. It's a very long time. We don't know what the world will look like in 10 years. Never mind create a plan for 10 years without having inserted in that plan specific time frame for periodic reviews of the plan by not the city, not the planning department, not city council, not the mayor, but an independent review panel at a 2-year mark, at a 3-year mark, and another 3-year mark to make recommendations about what is working and what is not. That makes it a living document instead of a document that sits in stone for 10 years. And if that requires a change in the city charter, so be it. Bring that on. The city charter also should be able to be amended as it needs to be amended with a majority rule of city council. That's what I have to say. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next, I have Liz Mooring. Liz. She left. Thank you. Chris Hunter.
Good evening, council members. Chris Hunter.
Good evening.
Chris Hunter, representing the Providence Working Waterfront Alliance, a coalition of... Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My apologies. Chris Hunter, representing the Providence Working Waterfront Alliance, which is a coalition of marine and industrial businesses on Allens Avenue in the Port of Providence. Have some testimony I'd like to hand out or submit.
Thank you.
The Working Waterfront Alliance has a number of concerns with the amendment language that is being considered to the comprehensive plan, specifically related to the W3 and M2 water-dependent and industrial zones of the city. Our port provides critical resources for the city, the state, and the entire region. The gasoline in many people's cars, the home heating oil for over 300,000 homes in Rhode Island, the road salt that we depend on in cold months, all comes in and is supplied out through the Port of Providence. The port is also a major recycling hub, taking metals recycled products to be recycled to avoid having to mine additional iron ore, saving carbon reductions. Industrial businesses are located in the port, have been located in the port for over 100 years, and shipping businesses. And the reason for that is the area has been historically zoned as industrial to encourage industrial businesses to locate, grow, and supply those products to the city, state, and region, which is what they've done. This ordinance would wholesale prohibit a number of very viable industrial uses that are core to what ports in Rhode Island and throughout New England do and supply. It would wholesale prohibit a number of uses. It makes no distinction between good and bad operators. It just says completely all of these are gone 100%. I would say that you are creating an industrial zone that doesn't allow industry, which seems to run counter to the very point of an industrial zoning. I believe there are only 2 or 3 industrial zones left in the city, heavy industrial zones being M2 and W3. Those are important resources to keep and protect, and that language was reflected in the original comprehensive plan. So we hope to work with you over the next week to discuss this a little bit further and share our concerns. We just feel this is extremely sweeping language that prohibits just a huge range of port activities. We're also concerned that it will prohibit a number of terminals that may in the future need to reconfigure for safety reasons, for requirements from state and federal regulations. We're concerned that it would prohibit even that. So we'd like to work with you on the scope of this and hope we can continue a conversation over the next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel Rocha.
I am not that tall. Good evening, Joelle Rocha. I am a land use lawyer. I do all real estate development for almost 2 decades. I've permitted housing units, hundreds of them, in the council president's district, in Councilwoman Anthony's district, and I have units coming up in Councilman Gogol's district. I'm going to start off on a positive note in that I also have a role for the last 2 years. I've been counsel to the Speaker of the House on his housing and land use package. So you're probably one of the communities that doesn't throw tomatoes at me here because, and I would commend Providence in always being ahead of the curve and looking for creative solutions to encourage development, encourage housing units, especially a lot of what's in the comprehensive plan related to parking. I also commend the public's comments on transit-oriented development. Those are very thoughtful comments. But the city of Providence isn't made up of solely housing. And we know that to sustain the budget, we need something besides housing, which is often a net loser as far as services and tax income as related to the cost to run the city. And honestly, you had me until the amendments today. And I also represent industries and commercial users. And I will say that in reviewing these amendments, and I will submit written testimony prior to the next hearing, I would encourage also to go out 2 weeks to give us a minute to digest this. But the comprehensive plan amendments as it relates to what Mr. Hunter just testified to, the industrial uses in the port, is not traditional comprehensive plan language. It's guised as a zoning change, which has a different process. Often you hear, discourage this, work towards more regulation on this. And we seem to have gone direct to prohibit uses. I will tell you, I will encourage you to take a real look at what these amendments do. And I will give you the example of the W3 zone where my client is located. And let me back up. Look, I'm not here for Rhode Island Recycled Metals. I wouldn't come through the door. But there are other users that do not have the track record that does. And I understand the problems with that facility. But if you take a look at the proposed amendments next to the zoning ordinance as it exists for allowed uses in the W3 zone, and I strongly encourage everybody to do this, there are 34 allowed uses in the W3 zone, 16 of which, roughly, cannot be done because they're not by themselves water dependent. Because, a lot of us remember when that water dependency restriction went on, that significantly curbed what could be done there. That leaves 18 uses. Of those 18, 8 are ancillary uses to some water dependent uses. For example, office, storage yard. You can't just have an office. It has to be related to a water-dependent use. So that leaves 8 left that can be principal uses. And the amendment seeks to obliterate half of those uses. That leaves a marina, a freight terminal, a passenger terminal, and boat building and repair. And whatever industrial that didn't just get prohibited, that is water dependent. I can't think of any. If you give me time, maybe it'll be in my letter. But I think that's the problem. There are very needed properties that need to be redeveloped down there. There is no market to redevelop these into a marina in this location, a freight terminal. It's just not there. And by the passage of these amendments, you have significantly limited what can be done there. I understand the goals, but I think there needs to be a discussion on another way to get there. I understand the public's comments, but I think a discussion and I think there's a reason it wasn't in the first draft from your very competent staff. There's other ways to get there. There's things to advocate for in those zones. There's restrictions to put on, but a prohibition is a significant problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Lily Borgestein, Borgesian. Lily? Good evening.
Lily Bogosian,
Because.
Fox Point Neighborhood Association. I'm the president. I'd like to speak about Fox Point initially. I spoke last week to you about Wickenden Street and my concerns for the local businesses because of the developments that are taking place on both ends, at bookending them essentially. On Gano Street, we have 56 units, 110 units, 10 units, 80 units. At that end, just under development now or proposed. We have at the other end 120 units, we have 114 units, we have 200 units, we have 10 condos and 10 other units. And also in between those on Wickenden and Brook, we have 75 units. So we have about 1,000 units. I think that's a fairly accurate number. Of those, approximately 1% are affordable. I don't really understand how we can call this new comp plan a plan that's going to represent people who don't have housing. Because the housing that's getting built in my neighborhood is for upper income people and students. And the incentives in terms of height and in terms of these bonuses that allow for reduced setbacks are a good bonus for developers, but they're not directed for affordable housing. So what I would recommend is that we take a look at this thing, this big document, and ask ourselves whether this actually can incentivize developers to actually build units that people who don't have housing can actually afford. And so what I would say I know that what you've suggested is that required parking minimums drive up costs, especially when it comes to affordable housing. I believe that's what I've heard you say, and that developers are already lacking a profit incentive. I would say, first of all, developers do have a big profit incentive with regard to these bonuses, but they are not for affordable housing. They're for anybody. So why not provide these bonuses only to the developers who are building affordable housing? And similarly, why not look at these limiting parking requirements or eliminating them. Why don't we do that for these developers who are building, if in fact they're going to save money? Incentivize them. Give them the bonuses for the height and the massing. Give them the bonus of not having to build parking. Why not do that? Because right now, in reality, nothing's going to change. And the numbers that I'm talking to you about, maybe you're going to say, oh, you're wrong by 2%. But right now, what we're looking at in Fox Point is a massive destruction, essentially, of our local businesses in the name of affordable housing, and it's not affordable. It's for the wealthy. It's for the parents of whose kids go to Brown, and I love these kids, don't get me wrong, I do. And it's for the luxury condos and the luxury apartments, and that's who's going to live in these places. So that's what I would say today.
Thank you.
You so much for your time.
Thank you. Anthony Cherry. Councilman Roya, please.
Thank you, Chair. This has been on my mind. I wasn't going to make a public comment about this, but for the two folks who testified, seemingly representing the interest of business at the ports, I hear you all when you talk about that potentially blue-collar jobs are in jeopardy by this amendment, but I have such an issue with that. I'm conflicted greatly because, in this testimony here, I'm reading that the port is the one of the few remaining industrial sites left in Providence. The reason why that exists is because for decades it was easy to put those polluting industries over in the South Side. And councilors here, Councilor Espinal and Councilor Harris, as a North Ender, I just want to make these comments and say I am not going to, for as long as I occupy this seat, I'm not going to live in a city where we're propping up business at the expense of black or brown people on the South Side. I'm just not going to do it. And the days of children choking on toxic air, I'm not going to be part of a city that allows that to happen. So I have no sympathy for industry that will continue to harm specifically the people on the South Side. So as a North Ender, I wouldn't want that in my neighborhood, and so we're going to use this comp plan to rectify that and change that for the good. Thank you.
Mr. Cherry, go right ahead.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate the time. My name is Anthony Cherry. I'm the Assistant Executive Director with Builder Island. Builder Island, for those who don't know, is the labor management firm that's comprised of both contractors and the building trades, of which there are 1,500 members in the city of Providence. We have concerns about this new amendment about the permitting and zoning around the Port of Providence and Allens Ave. We all can concede that Providence has to do everything in its power to remove the bad actors that knowingly and willfully pollute and disregard safety and environmental standards. The city should also look to champion and prioritize development of new industries that make our community safer and greener while meeting our existing and future energy needs. The building trades have year in and year out invest $6 million into training. That's apprenticeship training, that is training for new industries. The training of new industries goes to offshore wind, one that is developing on the Port of Providence and making Providence a leader in this area. However, this proposed amendment is quite concerning to those who live and work in this area. 100 members that live in Providence, 130 will live in Ward 10. Sorry about that. I apologize, I had a phone call coming out, I had to delete that.
Take your time.
While the intent of this newly published amendment may have the best intentions, the effect we believe will have a negative impact across the community and the city. For example, we asked that more precise defining of the word uses and expansion to target industries that need to be pruned, but not to prune the bad, but not uproot the good. And we also ask that you include language around just transition to ensure that the near seamless economic opportunities for those currently employed in the industries that may be phased out are given the opportunities for the new ones. I'm happy to take any questions, and I will be submitting written testimony at the appropriate time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Tompkins.
My name is Chris Tompkins. My title is Interested Resident. How to solve the Providence housing crisis, Part 2. How many students live in Elmhurst? How many students occupy homes in Elmhurst? We have no idea. How many students occupy homes in Washington Park? We have no idea. How many students occupy homes in Summit? We have no idea. How many houses and quality apartments are occupied in Fox Point by students? We have no idea. How many quality homes and apartments in Wayland Square are occupied by students? We have no idea. For 10 years, there have been hearings, subcommittee meetings to talk about student housing. The only thing that's been accomplished is that off-campus housing is on steroids in the city of Providence, Rhode Island. In the press release that I quickly glanced at on my phone, it talks about inclusionary zoning and anti-displacement. Well, I'm all for that. And the best way to start is to get control on off-campus housing. You can't compete. In the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal has had multiple articles highlighting what an outstanding investment off-campus housing is for developers. But we really don't have developers in the city of Providence. We have investors. There's nothing being grown. People are being displaced. Families are being displaced. And this has gone on year in and year out, meetings after meetings, and nothing happens. It's just really discouraging and troubling. Do the residents come first, or do the students? Students are the future, but unfortunately, they're not the future of Providence, because according to the the Washington Post article that I just handed out, Rhode Island is number 48 out of 50 states. That really hurts. 48 out of 50 states of graduates staying within the state after they graduate. That's embarrassing. But we're housing these kids. And on top of that, according to the Wall Street Journal, their student loans can pay the rent for the off-campus housing. So if you're a resident of the city of Providence, you're not just competing in the open market for an apartment, you're competing against federal student loans. How about that? And we're not doing anything about this. Zero. My final point is we are one strategic plan away from blocks being obliterated because an anonymous educational bureaucrat says, well, we need to increase the enrollment by 300 students next year because we have to balance the budget. And I live in East Greenwich, so I really don't care. So let's increase the budget. We'll increase the enrollment by 300 folks. Well, where are they going to live? Well, 300 doesn't sound like a big number to a bureaucrat, but that obliterates blocks, and families have to move out. Finally, the real estate community, their industry is shrinking because the pool of houses is shrinking because it's occupied by students. There are pilot agreements, there are TSAs, and I propose tonight that we have a new agreement. It's called Residents Deserve Respect, RDR. That's going to be the new acronym in the city of Providence, that we need to stick up for families, residents, and the people, newcomers who want to come here, come on in, and let's grow. But for transient students to kick families out is unconscionable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tompkins. Mr. Gardner, please.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to reiterate some of the amendments that we actually, have in the plan. First off, I just want to say that I would like to say that I appreciate the passion, that we just had on display in front of us. I would say that, that is an issue in terms of student housing and the location of, students off campus. That is an issue that, we've been, analyzing. And Councilwoman Peterson, who was unable to be here tonight, we do have an amendment introduced on her behalf, and I'll just read it again and then just extrapolate a little more. And it was LU7F in the land use chapter. Require colleges and universities to anonymously track and report on off-campus housing to ensure accountability in managing student behavior, as well as identifying and addressing inappropriate conduct of students living off campus. And as I had mentioned earlier, we did take this as just this language as a model of an ordinance that they do have in Boston. And as a policy perspective, it's like the first step in addressing these issues. But the first thing that the council is looking at is potentially putting together an ordinance that would give information to the city on exactly where students live, anonymously, of course. But I just wanted to make sure I commented on the record that that is something we are certainly addressing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Royas.
Thank you, Chair. I forget the gentleman's name, but thank you for your passionate testimony tonight. I would just want to add, I completely agree. I think when we talk about density, I think, and I'm generally, my general posture is pro-density, but we're afraid to talk about what I think is the elephant in the room sometimes is student housing developers. There is, my colleague from Ward 14, she's dealing with a significant issue in her neighborhood. It's trickling into my ward, but there is a monopoly happening that we haven't tracked in terms of data. And I'm afraid that our housing is being gobbled up by developers who, their business model predominantly is to offer housing to students at a time where families who have been deeply rooted in this city for a long time are in desperate need of. And so thank you, sir, for your testimony. It is something that is on the minds of every counselor here. We're actively, almost weekly, talking about this, and I'm hoping to, in the short term, change your mind that hopefully we'll get a solution to this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Brooke Charles. Brooke Charles.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm here to express my opposition for the zoning changes outlined in the proposed Providence Comprehensive Plan for Lloyd Ave and Ward 2. I'm a resident of Lloyd Ave. I don't come with fancy tidbits of information. I'm not a lobbyist. I am a simple resident of Providence, and I urge you to listen and consider the opinions of all voices of your constituents. I ask Council to amend the proposed changes to the lower corridor of Lloyd Avenue between Elm Grove Ave and Slater Ave, which is currently an R1, and the new plan would change it to an R3. This change would lead to higher density development, which would alter the residential character of the neighborhood, stress our old sewer system, water runoff, and our infrastructure. I ask City Council to amend the rezoning of areas in Ward 2, which are currently R1s and R2s, and are proposed to change to R3s. Increasing the allowable density in these areas would negatively impact the community's infrastructure and is not in line with the desires of your current residents, your constituents. I recommend growing the current R2 zone wider, not doing away with it, and allowing for 2 families to easily flex into 3 families where the space allows. This zoning is currently written in a change that will not address a housing crisis or create equitable housing options. Instead, they will lead to more high-end homes, condos, and multifamily residents in these neighborhoods. I also ask Council to amend the removal for required parking for the residential properties. The elimination of these parking requirements is not feasible, given the limited public transportation options in Providence. We are not Boston. We are not New York. The changes would lead to further congestion and strain our street parking. Before we remove the parking requirements, we need to have multiple, reliable public transit options. This does not exist now. To echo the gentleman who spoke before me, where he said everyone deserves a voice, this is why I am speaking, and I hope you hear my voice. Like I said, I'm a simple resident of Providence. Every time I come to these meetings, I have to juggle childcare, I have to get babysitters, or I have to do the dance with my husband. I urge the city to reconsider these proposed changes, and please listen to your community. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Justin Batista.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
During last week's public hearing, one of the defenders of the comprehensive plan who spoke before you accused its opponents of being racist, of harboring a prejudice towards outsiders moving into the neighborhoods. I can't speak to the mindset of everyone who is against the comprehensive plan, but speaking for myself, that is vastly untrue. My position has nothing to do with race or natural Providence citizens versus non-natural Providence citizens. It has everything to do with balance between making room for new residents and preserving what makes Providence Providence. A balance that respects people of Providence from all walks of life. You know what actually lacks respect? Upzoning changes adopted last minute without further deliberation, even though the changes are based on community feedback, limited as it was. The absence of an established design review board composed of local neighbors, no specific focus on the building of homeless shelters, particularly homeless shelters that are equipped with resources that not only house the homeless, but help them rebuild their lives as well. Not enough historic preservation, and you guessed it, no affordable housing requirement for all new housing. All this can be fixed if the comprehensive plan is set back for further revision. This must happen for Providence to have balance. Residents, both current and new, homeowner and renter, house and homeless, must be properly represented in the plan, a lot more than they claim to be. Sort of that, without a strong balance in place, Providence's future is destined to implode. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Batista. And Greg Dugarian. As Mr. Dugarian makes his way up here, if there are any council members that will not be here next week, because as you know, we will be here next week on Wednesday at 5:30, and you'll have another opportunity to testify. But if there's any council member that will not be here and would like to add comments tonight, after Mr. Dugarian, then we'll entertain that.
All right. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Pro Tem.
Thank you. As he makes his way, I'll probably be here, but I also wanted to just, as I've been listening to the commentaries, I do want to say a couple of things. One is that I would ask the members present to consider a motion to adopt the differential language for between small business and micro business, where it is the 98% of the businesses in the city of Providence. And by doing this, we'll be focusing a lot of resources and attention to the micro businesses. These are the businesses that the Chamber of Commerce's focus on, whether it's RIBA, whether it's the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, whether the Urban Ventures. These are issues of micro businesses that have been advocating for many years, and finally, we have an opportunity to really take a lead on it. So I would request our members to adopt this with a motion and accept it. The other thing that I wanted to focus on was, and perhaps on Wednesday I'll speak a little bit more, but it's in reference for us as counselors, as we continue to listen to our constituents from the city and the states and the ward, is that everyone is advocating for different sections, and we're trying to move and improve and grow the affordable housing. So, with that said, I know for a fact that we as a city continue to grow, and as it continues to grow with technology and education, this is becoming, and has been for many years, a city that people want to stay. And students that are here attending other schools or coming from other states are pretty much coming to our city, which is great. But we know that in certain areas in downtown or in certain areas don't want that change. For example, in downtown, those 1,000 units, and I agree with one of the testimony, less than 1% is affordable housing. We need to ensure, as we continue to develop, and as developers are developing these projects, that we as a city council or as a city really ask these developers to have mixed housing, affordable housing, whether they're 50, 60, 80, 90% of it, but at least give them those opportunities. So something to consider. Then the last thing is that this comprehensive plan, as I looked at it over time, and today and I next Wednesday, hopefully get to address what this plan is not addressing. It is a little bit more meat in reference to education. And I've asked Bob Azar to give me some insight into it. But the state guidelines also has that section for us to go into it more deeper. And I'm hoping that for the next meeting or during those times that we can add more languages to be adapted to this comprehensive plan. Because as we continue to grow, and the message has been clear, it's about the environment, it's about housing, it's about, the growth and the land use. But the reality is for communities of color, communities that are financially challenged, it's about strengthening our education, and this comprehensive plan needs to go into a little bit deeper in terms of what we want to see in terms of education in our city. Thank you. So,
thank you.
Again, I hope that the committee makes a motion to accept the micro-business language. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dugarian?
Grant O'Garian, 20 Exeter Street, Providence. We happen to be celebrating, what would that be? The semi-centennial of my involvement in land use and zoning in the city of Providence. I started paying attention in 1974, 75. Half a century.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I thank all of you for your public service. We have talented people in the planning department. Joe Mulligan, Bob Azar. But I'm disappointed in this plan. This plan needs work. What I've suggested before is that the City Council send it back to the City Planning Commission, tell the City Planning Commission to do its job, because they didn't do it. They held one public hearing on 3 or 4 sections, and you had 2 minutes, and then they had one public hearing on the entire plan, and you had 2 minutes, and then that was it. Not good enough. 9 sections to this plan. They should hold 9 public hearings, 1 on each section, so people can give detailed comments to each section. That's a plan. This is not a plan. Number 2, excuse me. I have here population history of the city of Providence from 1840 to now. And so I give this to whomever, and you can pass it out. I got 6 copies here. And you will notice, well, let me give it to you first. Okay. You will notice that the city of Providence population increased, and by 1930, we were 250,000 people in the city of Providence. The size of the city of Providence didn't increase. Still less than 20 square land miles. 1940, still 250,000. 1950, still 250,000. From 1950 to 1980, our population plummeted. We lost 40% of our population in 30 years. Did we slice and dice, slash and burn our residential neighborhoods? No. There's no justification for going in the other direction and overcrowding our existing, currently stable residential neighborhoods. That's what zoning's all about, stabilized residential neighborhoods. And it's done that. There's no justification for going from R1 to R2, no justification for going R2 to R3, and no justification doing any of that until we have the numbers in front of us to learn where we lost our population over the course of 30 years and where we lost our dwelling units over the course of 30 years. I requested this from the planning department, they didn't do it. I requested it from the city planning commission, they didn't do it. Time to send this thing back to the city planning commission and tell them to do it. What I requested was this. In Providence, we have less than 4 dozen census tracts. The census tracts haven't changed. And what I said was, by census tract, indicate what the population was in 1950, population in 1980, and the population in 2020. Also, those 3 demarcation moments, what the number of dwelling units were. And I divide dwelling units into 2 categories. It used to be called studio, efficiency, no-bedroom apartments, and 1-bedroom apartments. That's one category. And then 2-bedroom and more, the other category. Why? Because we're all concerned about dwelling units for families. You don't raise a family in a 1-bedroom or a 0-bedroom apartment. You raise a family in a 2 or more. I grew up, 2nd floor of a 3-family house, 2 bedrooms. We need that information, census tract by census tract, and then we can sit down and look at the maps and see where we lost the population, where we lost the dwelling units, and be more focused on what we want to do to try to replenish those census tracts. That's what we need to do. We can't do it in a week. We can't do it in a fortnight. We need some months to do it. You guys have a lot to work on, the budget, everything else. That's why I say send it back to the City Planning Commission. If you want to do it, fine. 9 public hearings on 9 on 9 sections of the comprehensive plan. The, I've been paying attention to, you guys have it listed here as mobility, transit. I've been a transit advocate for half a century. What does Providence do as far as we have RIPTA. What does Providence do as far as supporting RIPTA? Dollar-wise, are you ready for this? 0. But they could do things that won't cost them any money to, we talk about wanting to get more people out of their cars into transit, but we don't have specifics. There are specifics that Providence could do, and they don't do it. And I'll give you one example. The tunnel shut down for half a year in March to supposedly going to open by the end of the month. They definitely want that to happen because they don't want buses going up and down Angel and Waterman in the middle of winter. Bus stops were for inbound and outbound right by the tunnel. Close the tunnel, can't have the bus stop there, the buses aren't going there. So logic would have suggested that you have a bus stop on Angel Street coming inbound just west of Thayer, and on Waterman Street going outbound just east of Thayer. Is that where they put the temporary bus stops? No. They put them blocks away over on Hope Street or up the hill, top of the hill on Brown Street. Did that make any sense? No. Did anybody do anything about it? No. Who's talking to whom? I don't know. That's just one simple little example. 6 months. The, how many people have lost houses, have lost their homes because of the housing court? I keep bumping into people who lost their home because of housing court. I thought housing court was supposed to help people, you know, get their homes back to being spiffy. No, it seems like housing court is evolved into being punitive. That doesn't make any sense. We want to encourage home ownership, not the exact opposite. We should suspend housing court for a year, let the Department of Inspection and Standards work with homeowners to try to get their homes up to snuff and not penalize them. City services. How come, when I was a kid, the water bill was like semi-annual, and then eventually evolved into being quarterly. Now it's monthly. Why is that? Does that make any sense at all whatsoever? No. Does it waste time, effort, energy, and money? Yes. Who pays for it? We all do. Providence Water Supply Board followed the lead of the Narragansett Bay Commission, our sewer authority. We don't have direct control over that, but they do have to go before the Public Utilities Commission. Has the City of Providence ever gone before the Public Utilities Commission to complain about the Narragansett Bay Commission? No. Narragansett Bay Commission went from quarterly billing, they were semi-annual billing, then went from quarterly billing to monthly billing, and you know, Providence Water Supply Board said, oh, what a great idea. So a year or two later, Providence Water Supply went to monthly billing. So we have monthly billings from Borough.
30 seconds, Mr.
Okay.
Gary.
Last example on Narragansett Bay Commission, Providence Water Supply Board at least has a logical rate structure. They have a little connection fee because you got to pay for the connection to the street, and most of it's based on usage. That's what you want. Narragansett Bay Commission, they have a connection fee, much bigger connection fee, and less is based on usage. That's if you're a one-family house. If you're a two-family house, guess what? 2 connection fees, and much less is based on usage. Why 2 connection fees? Are there 2 connections? No, 1 connection and 1 imaginary connection. If you're a 3-family house, 3 connection fees, and much less is based on usage. Does it make any sense at all whatsoever? No. Did anyone complain about it? 1 person. Moi. That's still in place. It's not equitable, and because most low and moderate income folks live in multifamily homes, it's discriminatory. We need to pay attention to what's going on in this city. This plan is supposed to do that. It's not doing it. It needs a lot of work. We have the talented people to work on it. It needs a lot of work. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Greg. All right, so that concludes tonight's testimonies. With that said, I'll entertain a motion to continue. Next week, Wednesday, the 16th at 5:30, we'll be back here. Motion to continue.
So moved.
Made by Councilor Royas, second by
Second.
Councilwoman Harris. All in favor, aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. We'll be back here next Wednesday at 5:30, the 16th. And